Hello, everybody. Welcome to our second in a series during Black History Month. What we want to talk about today is community control of the police, which Angela and I campaigned on during the presidential campaign. And our basic position is as long as the police themselves, they're going to cover up their crimes, their assaults, their killings, and sometimes where there's a corruption, other crimes. And this is an issue that I became aware of when I was in high school in the San Francisco Bay Area, and the Black Panther Party put a referendum for community control of the police on the ballot in Berkeley, California in 1970. And I remember Ron Dellums, who just got elected to Congress, on a public TV station debating, advocating for it. And the Panthers have been talking about that. Fred Hampton was talking about it before he was assassinated in 1969 in Chicago. That referendum in Berkeley was defeated, but the Panthers kept pushing it. They had a huge conference of 1,000 people in Chicago to push for this reform in Chicago in 1973 with people from all over the country like Fannie Lou Hamer and Dick Gregory and Bobby Seale and so forth. But what happened was we didn't get community control. We got review boards, which are, where they even exist, are generally advisory. Community doesn't control, and but it's coming back because our guest today is in the center of bringing this reform to Chicago, and he's going to describe that. They're more advanced in pushing this forward in Chicago than anywhere else in the country. So in terms of introducing this topic, Angela, you want to add something to what I said?
I think that one of the most valuable things about this particular discussion is because there's so much controversy, even on the left, around what this actually looks like, what it could look like, how it could work, the intent behind it. So I think that this is a very timely discussion. I think that the fact that, this centered on all of the amazing work that they've done in Chicago is absolutely pertinent. We all know, those that know the history of the Chicago PD, they've been torturing and disappearing people for a very long time and, attempting to keep that quiet. And activists have been working very, very long, very, very hard fighting against this. And being that I'm from a city, 80 miles north of Chicago, Milwaukee PD, we've had our share of problems. And when Howie is talking about review boards, I can attest personally to what a joke, these review boards are, because it is exactly what Howie said. You got the police and the police. These people are ex-cops. When we were working for justice for Don, in the murder of Don Hamilton, it was very obvious. I mean, third party review, but these are all ex-cops. These are people that have ties to the current force. We're not going to get any justice this way. And so I think this is a necessary discussion. I think that this, shows people that token reforms are absolutely not going to get us where we need to go as far as ending state violence in the form of, police violence in our communities. So I think this is going to be an absolutely necessary and welcome discussion.
Okay, so let me introduce our guest today. His name is Larry Redmond, and he's a published photographer and novelist, but we have him here because he's a lawyer and a civil rights activist and also a third-party activist. He ran on the Harold Washington Party for mayor in 1995 in Chicago, and ran some other times, and then tried to run as a Green for Congress this year, but petitioning in COVID with the high signature requirements in Illinois cut that short. But the most important reason we have Larry here is that he's general counsel for the Chicago Alliance for Racial and Political Repression, which has drafted legislation that is before the Chicago Board of Aldermen, and they have a number of supporters. And this is by far the furthest advanced any community control proposal is. So we asked Larry to come on and tell us what the problems are in Chicago and why community control of the police can solve them. So Larry, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. I want to thank you and the entire staff and organization there for allowing me to be on, because you're absolutely right. This is a very important topic, and I think that it is something that needs to be addressed head on. One of the things, just to give you a little bit of history, it was mentioned that the Chicago Police Department has been brutalizing people in Chicago for a number of years. A congressman came out with a report 50 years ago, and he essentially said that said exactly that. Chicago PD is out of control, and something needs to be done about it. At the time, the mayor was Rich Daley, and he essentially did nothing. He came up with some review boards. I think IPR was probably the one of the boards they came up with, and it was a joke. It was a joke. And so about 8 years ago, the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, we decided that we were going to try to do something about it. And we determined that really the only thing that could be done about it is to change the way the police department functions. And I and a couple of other people, we sat down and we drafted the first iteration of what we call the Civilian Police Accountability Council Ordinance. And what we did was we had a number of events where the survivors of police torture, the relatives of individuals who had been killed by police would get up and tell their stories, and all of this was in an effort to make it known what was happening with the police department. And we did this for a number of years. We had a few rallies, but then Laquan McDonald happened, and this was during the Rahm Emanuel tenure as mayor, and it was such a joke. It was such a joke. And when we found, and eventually, the video of Jason Van Dyke shooting that young boy 16 times while he was lying on the ground. He wasn't even twitching anymore. He was just being shot. And that was sort of a jump start for our campaign to reform the police department. And you know, I hate to even have to say it like this, but those of us who were involved with the alliance at the time, before Laquan got shot, we knew something was going to happen like this that would help us jumpstart our campaign, and it was perfect. I mean, the mayor covered it up because he was trying to get reelected, and he knew that if this video came out, he would not get reelected. He covered it up. Eventually, one of our colleagues went to court and got the video released, and the rest in terms of that story is history. But after we had, I can remember some of the slogans we had now. 16 shots in the cover up. We shouted that so many times over the coming months and years that we were hoarse, and we took that campaign to the North Michigan Avenue Business District, and every Black Friday, we shut down that whole corridor in order to bring attention to the fact that we needed to have something done about police brutality in the city of Chicago. And eventually, people began to listen, and we had a few individuals who were on the city council that listened to us, but that really didn't didn't do anything. They just sort of nodded and said, okay, yes, But so they weren't really committed. And we went to people in the, we made our presentation to the aldermen on the members of the Black Caucus, the Progressive Caucus, and they all just sort of nodded politely and act as if you're never going to change this. It was actually the members of the Latinx Caucus that stood up, and I'm almost ashamed to have to say the Black Caucus did nothing, but the Latinx Caucus, they stood up, and one of their members said, "Yes, I will take this on. I will present it to the city council, and we'll try to see if we can get some congressmen, some aldermen to support it." And that was Alderman's I can't think of his name now. Carlos Rosa. That was his name, and he began to advocate for it. In the meantime, we had rallies. We had one rally a couple of summers ago where we blocked up the entire city of Chicago with we had literally thousands of people in the streets with signs that said CPAC, CPAC now. We have to control the police. Blah 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 blah. And it was breathtaking, the scope that the scope of the participation that we had during some of these rallies. And so eventually we got to the point where we were having we had our people in various wards in the city with tables. We had a tabling campaign going, and the people would sign on to volunteer to help us, and eventually we got more and more people involved to the point where we had tens of thousands of people signed on to work with us on this campaign. But then it began to slow down a little bit because it's kind of hard to keep that kind of momentum going. And so another incident occurred right here in Chicago. Anjanette Young, the police broke into her apartment, claiming that she was harboring a fugitive or had guns or some unmitigated madness. But it was again the mayor here, now Larry Lightfoot, attempted to cover this up, and the attorney who was representing Miss Young got the video out, and we saw how disgusting it was. And that lit a fire under people of Chicago again, such that as of today is Saturday. Yesterday, we had a meeting with members of the city council, and we're actually hammering out what my hope is will become the final version of the ordinance, and it'll be voted on later this month. And so we've made tremendous progress. We're not done yet because it's not passed, but we're working on it. And what another high point was when George Floyd got shot and not shot, get killed, get strangled by I can't think of his name, but when he got killed, the Chicago Alliance came out, and again we shut the city down, but not just the city. This time, because we have affiliates across the country, we put out feelers from coast to coast to coast. And I'd like to think that although a lot of the responses were spontaneous, I think in large measure now it's the National Alliance Against Racism and Political Repression, which was partially responsible for getting the numbers of people out that came out on those days and weeks that followed the George Floyd murder. And so the country is waking up to the fact that police departments across the country, they're running buck wild. And it's just a teeny bit of history. You mentioned in 1970, the Black Panthers had a referendum to try to get community control of the police. In Detroit, to some extent it worked. This is when Coleman Young was the mayor there. they have a system there where the police board consists of about, I think it's 9 members, 5 of whom come from one from each of the 5 wards in Detroit, and 4 that are selected by the mayor. But at this point, I believe that is the only city in the country that has any kind of community control of their police department. Now, that's not to say that the Detroit Police Department is somehow a beacon of light, of reform. I mean, they have their problems too. However, they do have a mechanism in place that they can deal with it. And the last time I looked, the police board in Detroit, they were actually actively addressing the issue of militarization of the police department. They were taking steps to demilitarize them. Now, I'm not sure how far along that program they got, or if it's still going on, or what. Because I just read the one article, but it just shows that because they have community control, the issue of controlling how militarized the police department becomes can be addressed. It can be actively addressed. In Chicago, if we have the same issue. They've got tanks, they've got helicopters, they've got surveillance on every pole in the city, and we have no real mechanism for addressing that. The only thing we can do is talk to the mayor and say, you ought to do something about that. And that's the kind of thing that needs to change. The people need the power to control the way they are policed, and community control is the answer. It's the only answer as far as I am concerned. And so so we're pushing for that. We're pushing for that vigorously. And my hope is that within the next 2 or 3 or 4 months, here in Chicago, we will have achieved it. And once we achieve it, it will become like an example for the rest of the country. It can be done. And one of the speakers that we had in front of the city council the other when we had this meeting that I just mentioned, her name is Aislinn Puller. She's with Black Lives Matter here in Chicago. She pointed it out pretty clearly. The law does not follow the law. The law follows power. Because at one time in this country, slavery was legal. And if the powers that were at that time did not challenge the law, many of us would still be slaves. And so that's where we are today. The law says one thing. Our intent is to challenge the law and make it what the people want it to be. That's the way we look at it. That's how we approach it. So that's I think that's about the extent of what I have to say in terms of opening remarks. Can I entertain? I'd be happy to entertain questions to the best of my ability at this point, if that's okay.
Larry, why don't you describe how it would work? The police commission or council,
okay,
and how they're elected and that kind of thing.
I'd be happy to. What we are proposing, there are 22 police districts in the city of Chicago, and what our ordinance would do is it would have the members of each district elect an individual from that district to be on the council. And at least that's the way it was originally. Now, it was brought to our attention that 22 people on the council might be a bit much. And so what we did was we concatenated districts, essentially, so that we have 11 districts that are composed of two districts each, 2 police districts each. And so there would be one individual from 2 districts that would make a total of 11 individuals on the council. And the council has the power. Number one, it's totally elected. The mayor has no input at all as to who is on this council. And the history with with Mayor Daley and Ron Emanuel and Lori Lightfoot are part of the reason that we don't want the mayor involved at all in it. It's strictly the public that elects these individuals. These individuals have the power to select the police chief. They have the power to select the director of what is called the Civilian Office of Police Accountability. They investigate misdeeds by members of the police department, and they select the members of the police board. And the police board they hear complaints and make determinations as to what can be done to punish police officers. And all of that is today in control is controlled by the mayor. And what we're doing is we're taking all of that and putting it under the power of under the control of CPAC. That's the Civilian Police Accountability Council, CPAC for short. And so the duties of the individual council of the council actually would be to number one, discipline police officers when they do misdeeds, and that can go as far as if CPAC determines that a police officer has committed a crime, and if the state's attorney doesn't do anything to prosecute this police officer, CPAC has the power to go to the federal court, convene a grand jury, attempt to get a true bill, and take that true bill to the U.S. attorney for prosecution. And now, if the U.S. attorney decides he's not going to do anything about it, we can't do anything about that. But it means we can take it out of the realm of the of local law enforcement and prosecutors. So because they have a symbiotic relationship. The prosecutors and police officers work hand in hand, and so often prosecutors are reluctant to prosecute police officers because of that relationship that they have with them. But if we take it to the U.S. attorney, that relationship doesn't exist, and so we think that there would be a greater likelihood that the U.S. attorney would prosecute. In addition to disciplining officers who have committed crimes, if they've committed lesser crimes that don't necessarily have to be prosecuted by the state's attorney or the U.S. attorney, we can control the CPAC would control minor things like violations of persons' rights that don't rise to the level of a crime, and that might just constitute having him be suspended for 2 or 3 months or something of that sort. That's the kind of power that the CPAC would have, and CPAC would have the power to fire him if necessary. And so, in addition to disciplining police officers, CPAC would have the power to set policy. What are the rules of engagement? How much force are you allowed to use in the street against anybody? How are you supposed to approach someone? Can you just roll up on a couple of guys standing on the corner and just get out and start swinging your clubs? I mean, clearly not. And if you do that, CPAC will discipline you for that. And there's accountability and transparency. CPAC has written into the ordinance that if an incident arises, any video footage, whether it be from the cameras on poles around the city, or body cams, or cameras in the vehicles themselves, that information will be available to the public within 60 to 90 days. There are some limitations on that because there's some privacy issues of the non-police officers, of civilians and citizens that we have to take into account. But what we're trying to do is circumvent the cover-ups that have happened in the case of Ms. Young and the young McDonald. And so, and in addition to that, we have the CPAC will be tasked with reporting on its website and what it is doing, so the community will know what they're doing, and engaging with the public. I think we have quarterly meetings, quarterly hearings with the public itself, so that they can tell us issues that they have with the police department and try to determine if we can resolve those issues. So that again, the people will be in control of the police. And so these hearings are CPAC's way of getting feedback from the public so that we can determine how to better control the police, how to better have the police engage with the public in a humane way. Right now, these guys are running around with these badges, and they think that they think it because it's true. They can do anything they want to do, and so our job is to fix that. We hear a lot in this town about to rebuild the trust between the public and the Chicago Police Department, but that's a total lie. There has never been any trust in the Black community, and probably the same in the Brown community. There's never been any trust between the community and the police department, because the police department has never deserved any kind of trust. They've always violated any trust we gave to them. And I can give you examples. This is when I was doing some post-conviction stuff some years ago. A crime occurred. Somebody got shot, and the police came in, and they had no clue who did it, and so they started asking around. A young brother came up. He had witnessed the incident, and so he came up, told the police, "Yeah, I saw who shot him, and he threw the gun in this bush." And so he said, "The gun is over here in the bush. Go look. You'll find the gun." And the guy who did it, just ran down the street. The police went over there, got the gun, and charged him with the crime, saying he knew where the gun was, therefore he's the one who shot the person, and he's going to prison. That's the kind of policing that has gone on in Chicago, and that's just one incident. And so police just do not deserve trust at all. And I spent a number of years working with an organization we called First Defense Legal Aid, and their job was to make sure that the individuals who were arrested get counsel while in the police station, because the way it works now, you can't get representation until you've been before a judge, and at that point the judge would determine, could assign an attorney to you. But by then it's too late, because the police will have had a chance to interrogate you in the police station, get a confession before you go to the judge. So by the time you get to the judge, the damage is already done. And so I spent literally years, representing individuals who were arrested, and you'd be surprised at how having an attorney in the police station changes everything. Because this is the mentality of the police department. Once they have somebody in their control in the station, they can almost literally do anything they want. And I got this call. I went down to the station, and after I got the guy out, he's in my car. I'm getting ready to take him home, and he begins to tell me what they did to him while he was in the station. And he said they were calling him the N-word. They were saying he did this. They were actually threatening him with bodily harm. But as soon as they found out that this individual was now represented by counsel, everything changed. They became humane again. It became Mr. Doe instead of young word clown. And so I'm saying all that to say the police department needs to be controlled. Not oversight won't do. The consent decrees won't do. I can't give you facts and figures right off the top of my head, but when researching during the work of the research for the ordinance that we were preparing, we looked into consent decrees, consent decrees have been in place all across this country, and they routinely, if they work at all, they work only as long as the court is empowered to enforce the decree. Once the court leaves the decree, the cops revert back to their old habits. And in fact, if you think about it, was it Samir Rice? I don't remember, but I think where he was shot, the police were under consent decree then, and so the consent decrees are worthless. Oversight. We've had oversight boards in Chicago, IPRA, and eventually COPA, the Civilian Oversight Board. Basically, what they do is they do an investigation. And most of the investigators are themselves ex-cops or cops, which means that the investigations that they do will be skewed in favor of the persons they're supposed to be investigating. But the most they had the power to do was make recommendations for discipline. And more often than not, their recommendations were ignored. And so that's one of the things that CPAC will change. No longer are we making recommendations. When we determine that the officer needs to be disciplined, we have the power to just do that. That's the kind of power that CPAC will have in the city of Chicago, and it's going to be a game changer. It's going to be a game changer. Because one of the things that maybe I should go into all of this, but we need to have psychological testing of individuals that want to be on the police force, because often we find that some of these guys, number one, they're a lot of them are ex-soldiers, and I'm a veteran, so I have the greatest respect for veterans. But policing is not soldiering; those are very different duties. And you can't just say because a person is trained as a soldier that he knows how to be a police officer. And but they want most cities want ex-soldiers to be cops, and that in my view is part of the problem. You can't just make a soldier a cop, because like I said, the tasks are very different. A lot of times the officer is charged with performing functions that are almost like a social worker, and the only thing that he's trained to do is use force. If he can't get you to, if you tell him, sit down and relax, and for whatever reason, you might be having some sort of a mental health episode. You might be overdosed on some chemical, who knows? But if you don't do what he says do, he doesn't understand the approach of trying to convince you to sit down. The first thing he does is pulls out his billy club and hits you, and that's just not the way policing ought to be. So we're about the business of changing that. So I'm not sure if I think I covered most of what CPAC can do.
Well, one more thing. How many counselors or aldermen have signed up? How many do you need? How close are you?
Yeah, I think we have about, I want to say 16 of the 50 on board already. Now, part of the problem is that there's a competing ordinance. We have been working on CPAC for about 8 years. About 4 years ago, I think some of the powers that be began to see some of the handwriting on the wall. And what they did was they put some money into financing an organization to come up with a competing ordinance, which basically leaves most of the power of the control of the police in the hands of the mayor. And I think their hope was that because CPAC was so broad in scope in terms of taking power away from the mayor that city council would be more apt to pass an ordinance that left most of the power in control of the mayor and give the impression that the police department was being reformed. So now that is that ordinance is called GAPA. It's the Grassroots Alliance for Police Accountability. I think that's what it stands for. They have a number of aldermen backing them, and I don't remember the numbers, but and so of the 35 or 40 aldermen who have committed to one or the other, they've got about half. And so, and part of this meeting that we had this past week was to try to bridge the gap. So the aldermen don't want to have to choose between one or the other. What they want to do is take the good pieces of that one, put the good pieces of this one, and come up with some sort of a hybrid ordinance. And I think that's doable. We can do that. We can give the best parts of CPAC and the best parts of GAP and put them together. And once we do that, I think we'll have close to 30 aldermen signing on. Now, in order to make the ordinance veto-proof, we're going to need, I think, it's 34 votes in the city council to get that done. We're not quite at 34. We haven't gotten the hybrid ordinance written yet. We're working on that, but even with the numbers that we have, we're not quite at 34 yet. So there's still some work that needs to be done, but we're working on it. We're working on it.
Well, we should get some questions here now pulled up from the chat. Here we go.
Hey, I know who that is. Rob D. Rich, have you checked out HB 3653 or HB 7120? What do you think of them? These are police reform bills.
I have not checked them out, and these look like bills from Congress. I'm not sure, but can you give me some background? I'm not sure. I don't recognize these numbers.
Well, I looked up the first one. That's a bill in Illinois to end cash bail. That's 3653.
Okay.
I'm still looking up the other.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'm working with some of those people as well. There are people that are working to end cash bail in Chicago, in Illinois, actually, because what happens is, and it happens a lot, individuals get picked up, get arrested, they go before the judge, and the judge will say, I'm going to, we're going to post a bond of, $1,000. For $100, you can get out. Well, Pookie hadn't got $100. And so now he's sitting in county jail. And he might sit there literally for years until his case comes up. And so, especially now that COVID has hit, we want to reduce the population in the Cook County Jail. And in truth, it has been reduced, significantly since the plague occurred. But the bottom line is, an individual that is incarcerated cannot assist in his own defense. Defense lawyers need information on a regular basis from their clients in order to be able to investigate the allegations against the person. And having someone in Cook County Jail, it hurts them. And so really what it comes to is, because they don't have the money to get out, it's only people who have money that have the ability to get a fair trial. And so these organizations in Chicago are about the business of eliminating bail. And in fact, most of them don't need to be there anyway. We can put them on house arrest. You can put an anklet on them. Any number of things you can do that will allow them to defend themselves in these criminal proceedings in a way they cannot defend themselves while they're locked up. So I'm strictly in favor of that one. HB 7120, I'm not sure about that one. Howie, have you any?
Yeah, that's the congressional bill called Justice and Policing Act. Deals with use of force, qualified immunity, and Department of Justice having the authorization to issue subpoenas in investigation of police departments for misconduct.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that, but it sounds like it might be a decent bill. But it also sounds like there's not a lot that it won't affect individual police departments. It sounds like this bill would affect how maybe the FBI would investigate federal crimes and give the Justice Department the authority to investigate police departments for crimes that they do. But all of this would be like after the fact, if I'm understanding you correctly. But
Yeah.
criminal law is a state issue, and so there's not an awful lot that the Congress can do to address the issues of police misconduct on the state level, because you can't just say it's a federal crime, because they just don't. We have in this country, we have 50 states, and all of them have their own laws that deal with the criminal process. And just because the federal government says ABC, ABC doesn't always trickle down to the individual states.
Yeah, I have a similar take. The Congress can only do so much, and like take use of force. We had a ban on chokeholds in New York City since 1993. 20 years later, Eric Garner was chokeholded to death, and the cop that did it was not disciplined by the police department.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's why, Congress can do a little bit, but in our communities, community control is what we need.
Yeah, community control is the only answer. It really is. So,
I saw this in the chat a little bit earlier, and 363-95135. Hey, darling. What kind of feedback are you getting from police unions about this council? Any chance of getting them on board? Lord Jesus.
Yeah, okay. I'll answer the second question first. No. And the answer I'm sorry, but that's the answer. Police unions, number one, we don't interact with them. But I can tell you this: when we first did this, this is 6-7 years ago, we were just coming out with CPAC. I sent letters to the Fraternal Order of Police, letting them know what we were trying to do, trying to get some feedback from them, and they never interfaced with us at all. And I expected that. And the truth is, I expect that once we get this thing passed, they're going to be the first ones to try to challenge it in court. But we're examining all of this because to make sure that we're on good legal footing, constitutional footing, as we're putting various portions of this ordinance into play. The bottom line is police unions do not want community control because they know what that means. They know what that means, and so we had gotten no feedback from them specifically. But I can tell you this. We had a rally. It might have been pursuant to the Jesse Smollett thing, when some of us were out in front of Cook County State's Attorney Kim Fox's office, picketing, saying that she essentially did the right thing by not doing in that case what some people thought should have been done. And there was a counter rally. I think it was by the fraternal order, the fraternal order of police. They had folks out there doing a counter rally, and it wasn't as ugly as it could have been, but it was ugly. They were vehemently against any idea that there should be any kind of change in the way prosecutions and policing is done, and they were very vocal. They were very vocal about things ought not change. They have a free ride in this country, in this city, and because they're cops, and they want to keep that free ride. And so they have not contacted us directly, but I know what they feel. I know they do not want any kind of they're running buck wild, and hey, running buck wild is fun, and they want to keep doing it. And so we gotta put leashes on them. We're gonna put muzzles on them, and they do not want to be leashed and muzzled. That's the bottom line.
And I have to say, the reason that I started like laughing is because I knew when you said you were going to take the end of this, because I'm thinking about Milwaukee, and a lot of the things that y'all have been combating in Chicago, we have parallel situations in Milwaukee, and this, with our police running rampant, murdering people, with impunity. And then you have this review board that is absolutely toothless, completely advisory, and you're making, and I've watched the police union in Milwaukee. I mean, it was this, and I'm not gonna name the cat. He knows who he is.
Yeah.
This cat, I mean, bristling to whoop heads at any opportunity, bristling at any thought of maybe y'all don't have to come out here and whoop heads. Can we talk about doing something else?
Yeah.
So when you said that, I was just, you already know.
Yeah. And it's not just Chicago and Milwaukee. I mean, any city you name, it's like that. New York, it's LA, it's San Francisco, it's Austin, Texas, it's Miami, Florida. Everywhere the police. New Orleans, I think New Orleans had a consent decree. I think there was a consent decree out in Seattle. Everywhere it is exactly the same problem, and you don't have to be big. I mean, there's we have the exact same issue. I'm talking with people in Evanston, Illinois, which is the suburb just north of Chicago. Mm-hmm. I'm working with them right now to come up with an ordinance similar to CPAC, but for Evanston. We have the same issue with police abuse out in Robbins, which is a suburb, all black suburb, out in the south suburbs of Chicago. There's Maywood to the west. Same issue. Cops are running buck wild, and so it's everywhere. It's everywhere. We're gonna fix it. We're gonna fix it.
Hey, Miss Carol Euler. Is anything being looked at to not hire previously fired cops from other areas?
The only thing I can say on that issue is, and it's a huge problem. It is a huge problem. But with CPAC, they will have the authority to vet police officers, and it'll be up to them to determine who they want to hire and fire. That's not the kind of thing you can put into the ordinance itself, because we give them the power to do what needs to be done. If they decide not to use the power, we can't do anything about that. All we can do is give them the tools that they need to get the job done. And this question would fall into that area. Can you fix it so that an officer that was fired from the Milwaukee Police Department doesn't get hired as a cop in Chicago? Well, that's what CPAC would do. Look at his background and say, no, you get fired over there for abusing some young brother on the street. You should have been arrested. You weren't. You ran out of town. We're not going to hire you here in Chicago. That's what CPAC would have the power to do. Are there any other questions?
Oh yeah. Forrest Jordan, I saw this in the chat too. They need to be, I'm paraphrasing you, baby. They need to be controlled and disarmed like they do in Norway and the Netherlands.
Yeah. Controlled, that's what we're working on. Disarmed might be a little bit more difficult because this is America. And in America, we have the Second Amendment. And I'm not gonna sit here and say we should abolish the Second Amendment. I mean, I myself have a concealed carry license, and so, but that, and one of the things that I'm going to be getting involved with another group with is training people in the Black and brown communities on how to go about getting a concealed carry license and how to your rights under using with that license. But now, having said that, what that means is cops have to have a license, have to have guns too. That's the bottom line. And I don't like. I almost sometimes wish that it were a situation where police officers here could do like they did in England. Walk around with, or at least used to do, with the Barbies who walk around with just billy clubs, and that'd be the end of it. But in this country, you can't do that. I mean, cops would be getting killed all the time. But that's the nature of American society, and good, bad, or indifferent. That's where we live now. But what we can do is to make sure, and like I mentioned, a couple of seconds ago, make sure that individuals who carry guns, who are not officers and want to carry a gun, teach them how to use the gun, how to use it safely, how to get licensed for it, and how to exercise their rights with that license. Now, that doesn't mean that you will be completely safe if you encounter a police officer in the street, because police officers, a lot of them are just scared. They're policing a neighborhood they do not live in, and they don't understand how the people in these neighborhoods live, act, as a matter of course. And so they're coming into a neighborhood that is foreign to them, and often they're fearful, and so they might encounter someone that is doing something that appears to them to be out of the ordinary, and they will react the way they're trained to react, using brute force. Now, and sometimes that ends up getting somebody killed. So once we train people on the Second Amendment rights, maybe some of that will change. I don't know. I wish I had the answer to that, but the short of it is this: we cannot disarm police in this country. That's the bottom line. We just cannot do that. We can get rid of things like no-knock warrants. We can get rid of things like having armed officers at peaceful rallies. There's a lot of things that we can do, but disarming them completely, that's not going to happen. Not in America, not today.
And I think we have to be very honest about the fact that, someone mentioned it, Ms. Leo mentions it in the chat as well. The problem of violence in this country is deeper than the police. This is a country that is founded on genocide, on enslavement, on violence, and it is maintained by violence. And it's not just the violence that it does within these borders, it does it internationally. It's what it exports. So our problem, you want to get to a point where we are able to disarm. We are going to have to recreate this society, this culture from the roots up.
Yeah, yeah.
That, I don't see that happening immediately. I will never say that it is impossible. I absolutely believe that it is. And the groundwork is being laid and has been laid. But I think that when people are looking at, oh, well, Norway or the Netherlands, baby, this ain't them.
Yeah.
This ain't them. We move a little differently here. Our history, to
That
say,
ain't how
hey,
we
let's,
roll.
man, that's negating the fact of this country's conception and its existence.
Yeah.
This is a violent country.
Yeah.
And we are going to have to be honest with ourselves about what we want to do about our history and our legacy to end that violence before we can even move forward on something like that. So everything.
I think I'm not an historian, but if I recall correctly, the Second Amendment was a concession to Southern legislators because they wanted individuals to be able to have guns in order to control the slaves. I think that was a concession, years and years ago to them, so they could have the right to have guns in order to keep the black population, the enslaved population, in check, because they were afraid of slave revolts, and it was a very real fear. You take somebody's lives away from them, eventually they're going to say enough is enough and come after you with machetes. And so they will need to have guns, and I believe that's how the Second Amendment even came into being. But don't quote me on that.
Hey, Elizabeth. Elizabeth Thompson is asking, back to the unions, how to deal with those.
Yeah. One of the things that we were hoping to get in CPAC is to give CPAC the authority to negotiate with unions with city contracts. I think we might lose on that one, because that's actually that authority rests with the city council and the mayor, and for us to try to get to that would be, we're already getting some serious pushback on that, and so what we might have to do is settle for being in the room when the contract is being negotiated and advising the city of the pros and cons of any particular item that is being negotiated in the contract at that time. That's the best that we will be able to do, I think, specifically, and as a union. Now, how to deal with them? Well, the Fraternal Order of Police has not always been a union. They got to be a union. This would be back in I think around 1968, out of Detroit, as a matter of fact. There was some civil unrest up there, and the mayor at the time, and that might have been Coleman Young again, wanted the police to do some things to control the people in the street. And the policeman said, we can't do that because that opens us up to liabilities. And I think that was where the Police Officers' Bill of Rights was born. It was born, I believe, in Detroit, to give the officers there the right to go into these, to control people in the street who were rioting. And after Detroit got it, other police organizations around the country saw what they had in Detroit and said, we better become a union so we can get this too. So I mean, the Fraternal Order, that's not a union. That's like the Masons or something. You see what I'm saying? They became a union in order to take advantage of the Officers' Bill of Rights that had just come out of Detroit. Now, I believe that's the sequence. Don't quote me on any of that, but generally I think that's true. They became a union in order to get these rights, and so dealing with them is just really a question of dealing with them when it comes to contract negotiations. We can't prevent them from being. They have the right to assemble, but when it comes to negotiating with the city for contracts, that's really where the rubber meets the road with the unions. That's what I have to say on that.
Yeah, I just want to add, whether it's preferably a community control board, but if it's a city council, which it is in my city, in most of these cities, the council just rubber stamps the contract.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then if they do try to fight a provision, at least in New York, it goes to arbitration. And the arbitrators tend to align with the union. So
Yeah.
to deal with that problem, you got to deal with both your council and state law. And it's a difficult problem because those contracts give the police rights in legal proceedings that none of us have.
That's right. That's
And
right.
that's why they feel so empowered to do what they do.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
a huge issue.
Yeah. It is. It is. It's and in fact, I've got a case in federal court right now where I'm challenging the constitutionality of the Officers' Bill of Rights. It'll be probably some months and maybe years before that actually gets to the Illinois Supreme Court, if in fact it does. But yeah, it's codified, and unions, police unions, have seen to it that they get these rates. They've lobbied for them in most of these in most of these states, and they've been successful in doing it because legislators tend to think and align themselves with law enforcement because they think that what law enforcement does is a good and right thing. It's and by and large maybe it is, but the way it's being dealt with today, no, it just is. And in fact, I mean, we talk here in Chicago. We talked about the police budget. The police budget accounts for like 40% of the entire city budget, which is, I think, the highest percentage of budget of any city in Chicago, any city in the nation. In New York, I think it's about 25%. In LA, I think it's about 10%. Chicago spends 40% of its budget on the police, and that money doesn't go to solving crimes because the murder, arson, those crimes, it's like maybe a 30% chance of those crimes being solved. And that's why police end up just pinning it on somebody to make it look like they're solving crimes. They're not. And so what we need to do is take some of that money and put it into social services, put it into housing, mental health, jobs. If you spend half that money on those kinds of services, crime would drop like a stone, because nobody wants to be out there, gang banging. Nobody wants to do that. They do that because they have to do that, because people are going to live. People are going to do, and they're going to do whatever it takes to do. When the baby starts crying, daddy got to do something. He's got to do something, and he's going to find something to do. So I mean, it's like used to be a commercial: "Pay me now or pay me later." You have to find something worthwhile for individuals in the city to do to make money, and crime will plummet. I think there's been a lot of talk lately about UBI, Universal Basic Income. And with the pandemic doing what it's doing and Congress having to give people money just to keep alive, we might be actually looking at a universal basic income in the not too distant future. Maybe I'm just being quixotic and hoping for the best. But if and when something like that comes into being, I think the bottom is going to drop out of crime, because people won't have to do things to get money. They'll have a basic income, and that's going to change. That's going to be a game changer, a huge game changer. But that's Larry Redmond's opinion.
I'm so happy you said that. That's all I got. I'm hearing. I'm so happy you said that. I actually ran in 2014 against. You remember David Clark in Milwaukee, that black sheriff that hates black people?
I don't remember that. No, but
I ran against him in 2014.
You've seen him,
and that was our platform.
He wears a cowboy hat. He loves Trump. Trump tried to appoint him to DHS, but he's He was so bad, DHS wouldn't have him. Even Trump's DHS wouldn't have him. That's who Angela ran against.
And that I say that to say what everything you just said, that was our platform.
Yeah.
That if you address poverty, crime falls. It's not rocket science.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. I mean, do the numbers. You know, it's basic arithmetic.
I was gonna say, you know, we wanted to take about an hour, and I think that's a great point to wrap up on.
Okay.
In fact, somebody put in the chat the position paper that Angela and I ran on community control, and at the end of that, you know, we say, you know, in the end, you really got to solve the social problems, and you know, then community control is what is good, but make the police's job a lot easier because a lot less crime and violence they have to deal with.
Yeah.
So people might want to check out the position paper and follow what's going on in Chicago, because you know, I'm rooting for you, because you're right. If you can get it done in Chicago, then we all got an example to point to.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
My concern is after all those protests, you know, after George Floyd, you know, they're off the street now, and most people have gone to their cities and they're limiting their demands to what it's usually Democrats will accept.
Yeah.
So it's a little tinkering with the review board, some use of force policies, and the police still police themselves.
Yeah.
And that's
gotta stop.
Right. Community control is a game changer.
Yeah. So,
any last words from Larry?
Do I get a chance to give a couple of last words? I think that
yes, please.
Part of the reason that we don't see money being poured into social programs the way that they should be is because there are a lot of people in power that don't want to see the shift in power that something like a universal basic income will bring. And in Chicago, under Rahm, he closed 50 schools in the black neighborhoods. A lot of the money that was siphoned out of the black neighborhoods went into the white neighborhoods. If you go into a white school, you get a great education, and a lot of the money came from the black neighborhoods. He closed a lot of mental health clinics, and all of this is documented. It can be documented, is documented, and it can be researched. I'm saying all that to say, race has always been an issue in the United States of America. It was from the very founding. It started with Europeans and Native Americans, and when Africans were brought in, the same issue arose. Policies, laws get changed, amended, whatever, based on race. And the police control issue is no different. There are people in power that do not want to see black people, indigenous people, brown people get power. And that's the reason that Rahm closed the schools. He didn't want to see us get educated. He closed the mental health clinics because he didn't want to see us get sane. And programs like that exacerbate the living conditions that people in our communities deal with. And in fact, going back to the importation of crack cocaine from South America, that was specifically to keep black folks down. And giving police officers free rein to do what they want to do is a continuation of that same program. So now, I mean, I don't want to end on this note, but the truth is what the truth is. Race is the issue in the United States of America. That's the elephant in the room. And we try to make it sound like we are no longer a race-conscious country. That's just a lie. It just is a bald-faced lie. And we need to deal with race. I guess those are my final words.
No, that needed to be said. And for people that want to follow your work, follow what you're doing, what are your plugs? Plug all of it.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Where do
Yeah.
folks find you?
Huh?
Where can folks, our folks who are here with us, our Green family, folks who will be tuning in, once they see this, on the platforms it goes out on, how can they follow you and find your work and follow what you're doing?
Well, oh man, I hadn't expected that question. I do have a website. It's LarryRedmond.com. You'll see some of my photographs. You'll see some of my books. You'll see some of my music. And I can give you my email address now if you want it. I mean, if you want to do that, yeah, that's that. Yes, that's my website. But if you go to l.redmond3@gmail.com, that comes directly to me. Comes directly to the computer I'm sitting in front of right this minute. And if you hit me up, I'll hit you back.
Y'all heard. Y'all heard. Well, I personally want to thank you. Just me sitting over here as somebody who is, from the Midwest, 80 miles north of y'all, sending big love,
No doubt after L.
Right up the hill. Lord have mercy. Sometimes it's too close.
They put my email address on the screen. They had L.Redmond. Take the dot out. It's just L.Redmond3.
Okay.
At gmail.com. So there you go. That's it. That'll come to me.
Mr. Redmond, thank you for being here with us and making time to, bring the knowledge to the people today. I think a lot of folks gained a lot of clarity on the issue because a lot of people, when we say defund the police, they're not real clear why and how that should look and things like that. So I personally want to thank you for being here, and I'm gonna shut up. Howie, you got it.
Well, again, thank you, Larry, for being here and telling us what's going on in Chicago and giving people a lot more information and knowledge about this issue. And, there's a lot more we could cover, but we try to give it to people in, bite-sized pieces so they can, get what they got and then they can come back for more. So we might have you back.
Thank you for having me. I'm available anytime. You guys call me, I'll be here. And I appreciate it. I appreciate the coverage. I appreciate the platform. So thank you very much, and it was a pleasure. It was absolute pleasure.
All right. Have a good day.
You do the same. Thank you.